Thanks, everybody. That was wonderful, beautiful. Nobody better than Matt and Mercy Schlapp. Nobody better. It's not possible. And I want to congratulate them for bringing CPAC down to Florida. Which, thanks to the wisdom of Governor DeSantis, is an open state. And I think, you know, Zoom is cool, all right? But it's not as good when you're talking about hearts and souls and minds, which is what we're talking about among conservatives these few days. So this was a brilliant stroke, and my hat's off to them. And to you. And to you. So I guess I want to apologize at the very beginning of this talk because this could be a boring speech. It could be a boring speech because I want to make one very simple point this morning. That's all. I mean, the boss is going to speak this afternoon at 3:30. I spoke to him yesterday morning before my radio show. He dialed in. He sounded great, and he's going to make some very important points about the present and the future. And I told him that my own talk this morning was going to be about his policy, legacies, and success, what he has achieved. Now, hang on one second. I want to make this point because not enough of my friends or my enemies in the media are making this point. President Trump's 4 years were a most consequential presidency. He achieved successes jammed into 4 years that nearly every president in American history couldn't get done in 8 years. And you know, in Washington, nobody ever lies in Washington. Never. But sometimes there are large periods of what I call cognitive dissonance. You can look that up. You can Google that up. Or let's just call them falsehoods. And I want to use some numbers. I'm an economics guy. To rebut these falsehoods, please stay with me. I'll do it as rapid fire as I can, but it is important to prove the success of his policies. It is important. Now, let me begin with my favorite. On our TV show, I talk about this virtually every night. President Biden and the others say when they took office, there were no vaccines. They say that. Again, Vice President says that. Others say that. So let me make this point first before I give you a number. Through Operation Warp Speed, which developed vaccines by using government deregulation and private enterprise, private sector genius, generated the most extraordinary medical scientific event probably in American history, and if not so, it'll be in the top 3. We are pretty near herd immunity, according to some important medical scientists. That means the proliferation of vaccines, which is now about 85 or 90 million, is actually almost 2 or 3 times the number of cases. We are moving at rapid speed. We will be able to open up the schools and the economies and get people back to work because of the vaccines, which came from Operation Warp Speed. There's a wonderful number circulating. Earlier last week, President Biden had a newser and congratulated himself on 50 million vaccines. Okay, congrats, Mr. President. So I kind of did some back-of-the-envelope arithmetic. And I said, okay, 50 million. He's in office 37 days. That's 1.35 million vaccines per day. And then I remembered, thumbing back, wait a second. In the last few days before the inauguration of January 20th and on January 20th itself, President Trump left him with 1.3 million vaccines per day. Now, look, I am happy, but don't tell me there were no vaccines since we handed him 1.3 million a day. Now it's 1.35 million a day. Please, don't say that. You're insulting American intelligence, and everybody knows it. On other matters, lower taxes, deregulation, border security, of course the vaccines, China trade, North American trade, the Abraham Accords. It was a remarkable, consequential group. And I want to read some numbers. Stay with me. Please don't walk out. It's okay. Here's the single biggest fallacy that I hear, and we've heard this for several years. And it goes back all the way back to the campaign in 2015 when myself and Steve Mnuchin and Steve Miller and the president and all kinds of folks, Kevin Hassett, worked out the president's tax cut program. We argued that if you lower taxes across the board, particularly business taxes, large and small business tax rates were lowered substantially. We argued that along with deregulation, the people who would be helped the most were not the upper crust, though I have nothing against the upper crust, I'm not a class warrior, but that the people who would be helped the most were those in the middle and the blue collar and the lower middle and the lower rungs of income, that we were providing them with more opportunity by opening up the taxes and regulations so we could have a boom in this country. And when you look at the facts, I'm going to give you some factoids, heaven forbid. That is exactly what happened. From data, statistics, from the Census Bureau and the Federal Reserve Consumer Finance Survey and the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Bureau of Economic Analysis and Commerce, these are all bureaucracies, they're not political, the data are utterly, absolutely clear. Absolutely clear. Go back, for those of you who read scripture from time to time, remember Matthew 25 when Lord Jesus says, "If you help the least among us, you help me." You help me. President Trump helped the least among us. Okay? Let's put that right out there. That, by the way, is why the Republican Party is becoming the party of the American worker first. Whether it's taxes or regulations or tough trade deals with China and Europe or North America, whether it's border security and immigration, President Trump established with great clarity and consistency the notion that we must help American workers first, we must help the American economy first, we must help American security first. And he started that with his economic plan, and that's what the numbers show. So we inherited an economy that was on the cusp of recession in late 2016. Immediately following dereg and tax cuts and so forth, the economy was re-energized and reinvigorated. And here's the most telling data. Back to this theme, that those who needed it the most got it, the least among us got it. The overall unemployment rate fell to 3.5%. That's a historic low. 3.5%. Pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic. But here's the thing. Go into your middle class, your blue collars, your lower middle class, your people trying to climb the ladder of opportunity. Get this. Real median family income rose in the 3 years before the pandemic by $6,500. Now hang on. That is 5 times in 3 years what the prior administration couldn't do in 8 years. Tax cuts for the rich, tax cuts for the rich. That's all I hear. Well, you know, it's true what Matt said. I started with Reagan 40 years ago. They've always said that, tax cuts for the rich. All right, here's the deal. Numbers, facts. Don't leave me. Hang on, stay. I want you to stay with me on this. Not only record low unemployment, 3.5%, but wages, real wages, increased 10% among blue-collar and middle-class workers, plus 10% for 3 years. That's the biggest gain in about 50 years. And, hang on, it gets better. This is so much fun. Thank you for your numbers. I appreciate it. That's the middle income and the lower quintiles. The top 10%, they did okay, but it was only a 4% growth rate. The blue collars got a 10% growth rate. And if you go to the top 1%, they only had about a 3% growth rate. So who won? Everyone won. A rising tide lifts all boats, but it was the middle class, blue collar boom who benefited the most, not the very rich. Real household net worth, you know, family net worth is what you got. Assets minus liabilities. Your home, your 401k, your cash. 3 years before the pandemic. Household wealth for the bottom 20% of the economy up 34%. Middle incomes up 20%. Get this, the top 10% wealth fell by 9 percentage points. Those are facts. That's Fed Reserve, Census Bureau. The top actually lost. The middle and the lowers won big time. – 3.5% unemployment rate. The biggest winners were African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women, blue-collar workers with no more than a high school diploma. All of those groups had 50-year lows in unemployment. The total workforce in the United States grew to a record high of 160 million. These are unheard of numbers. These are unheard of numbers. And finally, poverty came down more than at any point in 60 years. Poverty. In the 3 years before the pandemic set in, 6.6 million people were lifted out of poverty as a consequence of Trump policies and giving folks an opportunity to work and succeed. 6.6 million. Child poverty fell by 2%, the most in 50 years. African American poverty fell by over 2%, the most in 50 years. Asian American poverty fell by 3%, the most in 50 years. These are not coincidences. These are because of policies that put the American worker and economy first, policies that provided incentives for our free enterprise system, policies that rewarded success, not punishing it, policies that reduced deregulation and the burdens on businesses, policies that promoted a massive record in energy production, 13 million barrels a day. We don't need Saudi Arabia. We don't need Russia. We don't need China on this stuff. Policies that were so tough on China, the president was willing to put tariffs on them if they wouldn't come to the trade negotiating table. By the way, the Phase 1 trade deal is, I think, working, according to my dear friend, Ambassador Bob Lighthizer, but, you know, Reagan taught us trust but verify. Just in case the Chinese don't play ball this, there are still 365 billion tariffs on China, and we have stopped exporting sensitive, high-technology semiconductors and the like. And finally, after the drop in poverty, inequality has dropped by any measure. You can't have higher incomes, you can't have low unemployment, you can't have drops in poverty unless inequality narrows, and it did. It's a little in the weeds. Something called the Gini coefficient shows this. Other measures show this. I'm just putting it out there for you. And my last stat, African-American home ownership. African-American home ownership went up from 40% to nearly 50%. Finally, look, the pandemic, a tragedy, a once-in-a-100-year tragedy, plenty of hardship, plenty of heartbreak, no question, no question. But let me make a few comments on that. I was interested last October. A Gallup poll said 56% of Americans believed at that time that they were better off than they were 4 years ago, despite the fact that they had been in the pandemic. They still believed that they were better off. That's a Trump thing. That's a Trump thing. I'll wrap up. Here's a couple more. I'm going to read you some headlines. From the Wall Street Journal commentary, not the editorials, the commentary. Who made the vaccine possible? So this says, not the WHO. And the bottom, the subhead is pharmaceutical companies and Trump's Operation Warp Speed deserve the vast bulk of the credit. And this was written, the part of this I love the most, this was written by a Harvard political science professor, let me underscore that, Harvard political science professor, who was not a Trump supporter by any stretch, believe me. But he acknowledged who made the vaccine possible, not the WHO folks, but private sector pharmaceuticals exercising their genius and creativity and rewarded and backed financially and pushed through by deregulating the entire FDA structure by Donald Trump. Another headline. Trump shows that stagnation was not necessary. So we got these terrific numbers as he deregulated the entire economy. Mr. Trump's moves on the regulatory budget. Now, this is stuff that goes into the Federal Register. The regulatory budget resulted in roughly $200 billion of savings to the ordinary average American and their small business. Small business, backbone of this country. Small business folks are the backbone of this country. That's the blue-collar boom I'm talking about. Those are the people who work, 7 days a week, play by the rules, pay their taxes, go to church. They're the backbone of the nation, and they flourished during the Trump years. Another headline. a tale of two recoveries. Not only did President Trump launch a tremendous recovery for the 3 years before the pandemic, but even while we still work through the pandemic, we are in a strong second recovery that he fostered. This is still a V-shaped recovery, as I argued last summer, and as the president argued. He'll probably mention it this afternoon. We talked about it yesterday morning. Couple points here worth noting. President Trump presided over the best, largest emergency relief package to deal with the pandemic in American history. There was nothing like it. And I want to make this point, it was done on a bipartisan basis. Damn it. Mnuchin was up there, I was up there, Mick was up there. All kinds of us are up there in the tax committees, in the banking committees to work it through. And it was a phenomenal package that probably saved 50 million jobs and helped out temporarily laid off and unemployed people. That relief package got us on the road back to recovery. And remembering that as the liquidity was replaced for an emergency, we had to get to the other side of the bridge. Nonetheless, the low-tax, low-regulatory economy was still there fundamentally. And now you're seeing, as the pandemic withdraws, as the vaccines are huge, as herd immunity is growing rapidly day by day, America is on the way back. Once again, it was a strong recovery. It was interrupted by a horrible event, a natural catastrophe, and now we are back, if we don't mess with it. If we don't mess with it. If you want to raise taxes, if you want to raise regulations, if you want to end fossil fuels, if you want to pander to China, if you want to favor Iran, okay. But that's not going to help the economy, and that's not going to help people who need help the most inside America. Those are not America First policies, folks. That's my biggest concern. That's my biggest concern. If you leave the economy to its own devices under current Trump policies, it will boom. But if you fiddle with it, if you start punishing success, if you make snide remarks, if you go back to far-left progressivism economic policies, which is the near cousin to socialism, then it won't work. It just won't work. And we have to understand that. Last one. This is one of my favorites. I know it's obscure. Stay with me on this. 5G. 5G. That's the internet hookup, broadband hookup. Makes all internet go faster. We'll be driving cars and doing medical operations and Lord knows what, literally at 5 times the speed of light or something like that. The National Economic Council, I was the coordinator, intergovernment coordinator for this, probably because nobody else wanted to do it. But it's very important. It's very important here at home. You know, I want to get broadband connections to the exurbans and the rural people who haven't gotten it yet. It's very important for our industry, for our technology developments, and it's also very important to whip China. Okay? And I'll just say, this article, Trump cleaned up 5G. Under his administration, we deployed 428 5G operations in 375 cities. We sold 5,000 megahertz of spectrum, which will be used to get not only urban 5G, but suburban and exurban and rural 5G. Rural 5G. So we're proud of that. Those are just a few. I'm going to quit. I've probably gone on way too long. Matt and Mercy have been wonderful to me in letting me give this out. I thank you for staying through all these numbers. Really, you're a wonderful audience. Thank you very much for that. And I want to make one last thought. These policies of growth and security and America first, which were put into place under the enormously consequential presidency of Donald Trump, these policies will unify and unite Republicans and conservatives in the name of helping America's worker and economy and national security first. There's no division with these policies. I went from Reagan to Trump. The policies are similar, only more so. And that's why we should rally as conservatives and follow through on the remarkable achievements of former President Trump. That's what I have to say.